All right. It says recording. So, all right. How's it going, everybody? This is episode number 2 of the Conscious Bodybuilding podcast. Again, I have my buddy Matt Bellino on. And before I get into some of the topics I wanted to talk about today, I just wanted to say that kind of how we're going to do things moving forward. So I just texted Matt, I don't know, like a couple weeks ago about actually wanting to start this thing. And I just sat down and we just did it. It wasn't something that was pre-planned. So I'm working on getting some guests on. I've emailed a couple people at this point, and Matt's going to kind of be my guest host for some of those because as far as like keeping this podcast with relevant and current information, he understands some of the terminology and some of the mechanisms behind a lot of these things that we talk about a little better than I do. So I think it's really good to have him on for some of these. So just be patient as we move forward. Hopefully I'll get some more guests on, more guests of higher caliber. But it is kind of difficult because we're just starting out on a small page and podcast. So just bear with us and we'll try our best to keep bringing good content to you. So how you doing today, Matt?
Good. I can't complain, Can't complain. How you doing?
Yeah, good. You just trained right now?
Yeah, I just got done about, I usually start around, give or take, it depends, but around 4 or 5. And
yeah, after school, right?
Yeah.
What'd you train today?
So today I did legs. I'm doing a legs push-pull split.
Nice.
Kind of a new thing I've been doing. I used to do the row split, the chest, back.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I know. I think I got that in your head. Like, hey, you should do a little bit better, or a little bit more frequency.
Right. Which has helped drastically, I would say.
Yeah. How so do you think?
I think the thing I like about it too, the thing I really like is I think it's underestimated when they lift and stuff. I definitely did it where I'm lifting chest. I'm like, all right, well, I need to let my chest recover all this stuff. But I wasn't really aware of how much food I was eating, the protein I was eating. So it just very depends. I mean, now with the summer, I love summer only because my diet is, I'm not really doing too much. If I'm going to lab, it's early in the morning. I'm also doing intermittent fasting, so it kind of works really well with my eating schedule.
Oh, really?
I go to lab. I try to, at least. It's usually around like 7 in the morning, 8. So I'll go in. I usually do a lot of preps. It's all on my own time. We have like certain projects and experiments to run, but I like doing it kind of at my own pace. So I'll go in the morning, prep for one experiment, run it the next day. But I used to go in and do a prep and then run a Western blot, and then that'd take me like 8 hours. So it'll mess with my eating. It'll mess with my
So do you not eat in the morning? Like, when's your window of eating? Like once you get out?
Usually I like the 12 to 8, but I've been doing 1 to 9 lately.
Okay.
And it seems to work the best with my schedule. Since I'm training around 5, so I'm kind of optimizing my meals around pre and post.
Yeah. That's probably the most important, especially if you're doing that.
Yeah.
Do you find it messes with your like mental clarity, or do you find it? So I've heard some people say different things, but do you find you're just more clear when you're not like worrying about food and maybe you're not consuming food?
I think so. I've been playing around with it a lot recently, and there's been times where I've had to break my fast because I'd rather get in my meals and my protein, and then just say, you know what, I'll take the hit. Because either way, I'm still, I would say, around, or if not, maybe a little slightly under maintenance. Just diet alone. So you throw training on, I'm assuming I'm about 300, 400, 500 deficient a day. So either way, it's like maybe I'm doing this for like I wanted to see the insulin sensitivity and
I mean, ultimately you're going to see that with creating a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
I think the more important thing to point out there, I get a lot of people ask me about fasting. A lot of people in my work do fasting, and the important thing to point out is that it's not like it's not magical. It's just another way to create a deficit. And I think it's worked for me, and I think it works for you. And a lot of the time where if you're sitting down and doing work, you're not really thinking about eating, but at that time, maybe when you get home, when you get home from lab and you're just sitting around, maybe after your workout, that's when you tend to want to snack and you want to eat and you're more hungry. So that's how it works for me. Sometimes I'll do work in the morning and my meal spacing, I don't fast, but my meal spacing might go 4 or 5 hours sometimes while I'm working, but I get more hungry towards the nighttime. So I ended up putting a bulk of my calories there. But I think your insulin sensitivity is more so probably coming from creating that deficit than anything.
That would be my guess. Yeah. The deficit along with the, assuming with what it does is the long periods of the fast where you're not ingesting any calories, so your body's
Right.
like, all right, well, we're not bringing any type of nutrient right now, so there's no reason for us to even use insulin or
Right.
stuff like that. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd have to look into the research. I've heard a little bit, and I think it's still being studied, and there's still stuff coming out about it. But I've heard a little bit about it helping with insulin sensitivity and things like that.
Yeah.
So I would want to look into that more. But yeah, I think for now, I think it's a great way to create that deficit. And if it works for you, because a lot of people I know who do it, they overconsume in their window. So like if you wait too long, like myself, if I wait too long to eat a meal, then I overconsume at that meal, especially if it's not like a tracked portioned amount,
Right.
because it's like you're just more hungry.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're thinking about fasting, is like, do you have that problem? Like, or when you go to eat, can you just eat a normal amount and continue on with your day? So I think that's
one thing I find interesting though, and I for one of the classes I had to write a grant proposal, but I focused on intermittent fasting because last semester I started getting into it. But a lot of the studies I read when I was doing my grant proposal, I was doing a lot of research on the intermittent fasting because there's multiple ways. I don't know if you've heard of the alternate day fasting and
yeah, I've heard of different types and stuff.
That's when I learned more about it. But for the time restricted feeding, which is the usually the 8-hour window of feeding, and then the rest fast, it's interesting to note because all these studies, they didn't fix the calories for the people on the diet. So they could eat whatever they want during those 8 hours, which raises a question to me. Well, let's say I do intermittent fasting, but I overconsume calories, right? One thing I was looking for, because at the end of the day, they said, okay, well, it is a significant diet for weight loss, but without tracking that number of calories, it could be a possibility that since the window is only 8 hours, that they just do not consume more calories. But they never did a study that compared it to a regular, let's say, 5.
Okay, yeah, calories equated. Yeah, that's the thing with nutrition research right now. Is like I would only trust a study when they equate protein.
Right.
Because protein is kind of like this, it has a thermic effect, and it's kind of this variable that if it's not controlled for, it can cause weird outcomes.
Right.
So that's interesting that they haven't done that yet. That's kind of a bummer. Yeah, no, I mean, maybe we can theorize that maybe there's more lipolysis or maybe more insulin sensitivity when you do eat, but we can't confirm that based on that. Like I really still think like calories are king. Obviously that's shown by what you're talking about. Like if you eat in a surplus, you're going to gain weight, but maybe there are some differences when calories are equated. I haven't looked into the research, so I don't want to talk on it too much, but if you maybe equate for protein and calories, is there maybe differences among the two groups?
Right.
I know they have done it for carbohydrates, low and high carbohydrate, and they see little difference when protein is equated.
In the long run, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Which because I'm surprised they haven't, and that's what I wrote my grant proposal on. Is okay. Let's say we put one group of people on the same diet as the other group. The only thing we alter is the time. Let's say one group is doing an intermittent fasting, but it's very hard to do because of genetics, maintenance calories. What if somebody's maintenance calories? So you'd have to, like, in my head, what if we,
calculate their, well, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. No, totally right. We calculate their maintenance calories and we subtract 500 for both groups and have the same exact macronutrient breakdown. Let's say like 35% protein, 45% carbs, 20% fat.
Right.
For both groups, but the only thing we alter is the time. It'd be interesting to see if they lose more weight on the intermittent fasting diet or if it's the same.
Right.
Because if it's the same, then I guess technically the only advantage you're getting would be the insulin sensitivity in this, but it's
potentially if that proves that as well. And I mean, I think that's probably a metric that you probably should test in there too, is fasting, glucose fasting, insulin, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Well, and I wouldn't say percentiles of body weight and stuff would be good, or total calories, because percentiles can be different depending on your caloric needs. It would be more of like fixed amount of protein, and then with our information about it'd probably be fixed carbohydrate percentages at that point, but fixed amount of protein for your body weight, and then probably variants of carbohydrates. I don't know. I mean, studies are so difficult. Like, if you don't account for every single variable, you could totally fuck up the study too, is what I've learned. Like, it's like you don't account for one little.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to follow the science, but I mean, sometimes the science doesn't really translate. Which what was the other thing I was going to say?
Oh, I was going to talk about, I tested my fasting. I just got my blood work. So I was looking at that before we got on here with my glucose and my fasting insulin and the ratio of that. I'm going to do a whole video talking about it, but I've gotten a better range. That's for sure. That's a good thing. People don't understand how bad it is to have high insulin and how many trickle down side effects that has. I think I was like a 9, which is within range. And I don't want to talk about blood work too much, but just real quick on that topic, 9 is within range. I think the range is to 28 on a panel, and which is way too high. I mean, that's probably why some of our, probably attributes to the diabetic problems that we're having and obesity and things like that is allowing people to be okay with having levels that high of insulin. But I mean, it affects your lipids. My whole panel was totally messed up, and it was everything I think it was accounted for in my mind. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but insulin was the one thing that was really throwing me off, is because I had metabolic syndrome when I was really heavy my last off season. And I've gotten that down to a 2, so it's really good. 2. I think they're saying you want to be below 4 to be healthy. So luckily it's down to a 2. My ratio. There's also a really cool thing you can do is if you do a panel with your insulin. I did a male athletic anti-aging panel, and what you can do is you take your fasting glucose, which either is on your panel or you can test it before. I have like the finger glucose monitor.
The poker.
Yeah, so I tested it before. It was different actually, so I don't know what the dish. My blood glucose before was, I have it right here, it's 80, and it was 89 on my actual test, which was a little high. But when I took the ratio, so I took my fasted glucose and my insulin, and you plug it into this equation. I don't know what it's called. It'll tell you how insulin sensitive you are based on that, or an estimate. And I came up good on that, but that was really cool. I've never done that before. So because I never knew there was actual tests, and I heard someone talking about it. I'm like, oh shit, like you can test how sensitive you are to insulin,
depending on how much insulin is released compared to how much your cells are uptaking, how much is it.
And I was listening to this guy today, and he was talking about you want your fat tissue to be insulin resistant, because you don't want your fat tissue to be
take up into
carbohydrates and storing them. That was really interesting. I don't know how that works, but I do want to piggyback on that. So last podcast, you mentioned a couple of things that actually kind of stood out to me. I went back and watched it. Actually, like learned more going back and watching it. Was really cool to listen to our conversation. Yeah, because I think I passed over some things that were total like nuggets of good information. But so I wanted to kind of focus on those a little bit because I think that's such a relevant topic for myself. I think a lot of people are talking about that a little bit now too. I think the evidence-based community around coronavirus is understanding that the COVID-19, the seriousness of the illness, has something to do with diabetes and stuff like that. But it's really relevant in my life. That's all I'm saying, I guess. But anyway, I wanted to talk about carbohydrate metabolism and how it applies to bodybuilding. And then I wanted to also ask you, I have it written right here. I also wanted to ask you about nutrient timing after that. So first, like how does carbohydrate metabolism on a maybe biological level relate to bodybuilding? How can we maybe apply it? Any maybe information you have on that?
In metabolic regulation, I think it's important to understand, first of all, the macronutrients, because realistically it all comes down to the macronutrients, and then everything trickles down. So in terms of carbohydrates, it's important to know we have a range of carbohydrates. You have starches, you have simple sugars, you have complex grains. So it's all, and it comes down to the same thing. Is every carbohydrate is damn near the same. The only difference is the timing on when it's actually metabolized, how much energy is released. But you take a grain of like a gram of sugar and a gram of a rice carbohydrate, and it'll give you the same amount of energy. But the difference is how fast is it broken down? How quick does it produce energy? And how quick do you have to use it before it says, all right, well, this guy doesn't need this energy. Let's store it for fat, for later usage, or glycogen or whatever. So when it comes to bodybuilding, and and unfortunately, I wish we could, in class, I wish I could just pop off with questions. What about, this or that or this?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to, you have to apply it to, because everything in class is applied to the basic normal diet, the basic human. Because I hear a lot of people, for example, quick example, a lot of people are like, oh, well, the intake for protein, you should only be, I guess 50 to a certain amount of, 75
Oh,
grams.
dude, that was one of the, I ended up dropping my sports nutrition class
Yeah.
because I was so
Yeah.
frustrated about that. That was one of the things where it's like the RDAs for that stuff
Right.
is just ridiculous. I was like, you want me to
RDA.
eat 80 grams of protein? I'm like, I've been doing pretty good on like a gram per pound for a while
Right.
now. I don't know. I know that's anecdote, but
Right.
yeah.
But the beauty of it is, even scientifically with protein, at least, is if you don't use that protein for muscle building and stuff like that, protein itself as a macronutrient could be used as energy.
Right. Gluconeogenesis, right?
Right. So a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, if you eat too much protein, you probably end up, pooping it out or something, which isn't true. Your body will store that.
Does something with it.
It'll either, and a lot of it's DNA synthesis, nucleic acid synthesis, the proteins are, because remember, the central dogma goes from DNA to RNA to proteins.
Yeah.
Which is all genetic. Even the protein level is genetic, not the macronutrient itself, but back to the carbohydrate metabolism in terms of bodybuilding. And especially in nutrient timing, because I think they go hand in hand, which, a lot of people, they say, oh, well, I need to hit 300, 400 grams of carbs a day or something, and they're eating, the wrong carbs at the wrong time, so the first thing that happens on the biological level, the biochemical level in your body when you ingest any type of carbohydrate, first it goes down the stomach, it's absorbed through the intestine. For whatever the carbohydrate metabolism, it's taken to the liver and is converted to glucose. So every carbohydrate is first converted to glucose, so it could enter the metabolic pathway, whether it's glycolysis.
And to stop you right there, sorry to interrupt. So my question is, fructose. So does fructose just stop at the liver? Is that how that works? Do you know?
So fructose is another thing. So fructose, sucrose, whatever sugar. So it all depends on, glucose is the simplest. It's a 6 carbon chain,
right?
Or it could be 5. I don't really remember, but something like fructose is also pretty simple, but it's not as simple as glucose. So once it gets taken to the liver, your body will cleave the certain bonds in it to convert it over to glucose.
Okay. So is it stored for later in the liver?
It usually depends. There's certain things called they're substrates, but they're it's not substrate binding. It's allosteric regulation. So if your body has, let's say I eat a super big meal and then I'm still like, oh fuck it, let me go get some snacks, right? My body is going to break down that food, but right when I throw down more carbohydrates, there's enzymes that say, wait, whoa, we have way too much of this already. We're still breaking this down. So what it'll do is it'll take those nutrients and it'll convert it. It'll shuttle it to another pathway for another. Oh, okay. One example I could give, and usually that doesn't happen. Usually your body will break it up. Will break it up, make energy out of it, and from there, if you don't utilize that energy, let's say, it's going to say, all right, well, let's store it for later usage. Either in the muscles, it's glycogen, and the liver is glycogen, or if there's just too much glycogen there, it's going to turn it into fat. And say, all right, store it for then. I hope that
No, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. So I mean, it's kind of using it where it needs it for the most part.
Pretty much, yeah. Because people don't understand. And anything you put in your body, whatever you poop out or whatever, it's going. That stuff. It's not like you're pooping calories out.
Right.
That'd be great.
Unless you're taking metformin, something that causes malabsorption.
Right. We actually learned a little bit about metformin. I don't know if do they use metformin, and I guess it's an insulin medication.
I've taken it before.
Yeah, or not insulin, a diabetes. I think they use it for diabetes.
It's a diabetes for insulin sensitivity, but the I don't know the exact mechanism.
Right.
But
it's funny because it's still unclear. We were talking about it. It was
really? Yeah.
The mechanism of action is still kind of unclear, but we know that it works for some reason. So I thought I was like
something about malabsorption of
malabsorption
carbohydrates in the small intestines. So
is it fiber or is it certain?
It's not fibrous. I don't know what. Here, let me look. Okay, hold on. I have it right here.
Oh, nice. Let me
see if I can get the. Let's hope the you know how they have the little packet in there that says what it is and what it does.
Yeah, I remember there was a lot of like pre-med in that class, and I remember
This is to mix with almost.
Oh, yeah. Our professor was like, all right, well, trick question. What's the mechanism of metformin? And everybody was kind of caught up and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I don't know either. You know, like we don't really know yet. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Nice. You know?
I didn't keep any of the original boxes. Shit. Because usually it comes with that stupid packet that tells you what the mechanism is, and it'll have a trial.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, nothing, unfortunately.
Are we looking at metformin right there?
Yeah, these are metformins.
Yeah, nice.
Sustained release, 500 milligrams. Yeah, shit. I'll have to look for them later and find that packet, and we can talk about another episode. But
yeah,
usually they have the little thing. Maybe they had some idea of how it's.
Yeah.
But malabsorption of carbohydrates, which is something you don't necessarily want as a bodybuilder. I just took it because I was a little more in a health conscious time.
Right.
Sometimes when I have like a too big of a cheat meal too, I might have one because I'm like, my body's not going to utilize 800 grams of extra carb, or however many.
Yeah. It's going to store it. There's no way.
It's going to store it. Right. And I used to think that and one of the reasons why I've been able to maintain such a leaner physique is realizing that foods don't have magical properties. Like you don't eat a muffin and get a pump. Like it's the stupidest fucking thing.
Great.
No, but I mean, if you're depleted, yes, if you're like really, really like stage contest lean and you eat something that's really calorically dense, which people don't understand, a muffin is fat and carbs. It's not just carbohydrates.
Right.
You may get like a pump. You may actually, because your body is, your sensitivity and the way you utilize that is so much greater when you're depleted.
When you're depleted, right? Well, that's one thing. I don't know if I looked specifically at the study, but I was looking at something. I don't know what it was through. I'd have to take another look. But from what I remember, they're saying, let's say you train fasted, and you have your protein shake after. It's way. I mean, that's the first thing your body gets broken down. It's going to absorb way more of that versus, let's say you eat a meal pre-workout, which I mean, I think you should do, but let's say you have a protein shake after, is your body's still breaking down the previous meal and everything else. So it's still being absorbed, but there's more things being absorbed with it in the intestines. Influx of carbohydrates, I'm sure proteins and stuff, versus right after your workout, your muscles are depleted. Your cells are like, oh God, we need some sort of nutrients. You down a protein shake and your body's going to say, okay, boom, let's go. Let's start, I
mean, I've definitely run into that problem when I'm fasting and I'm just trying to shove tons of food down, and sometimes meals overlap. Sometimes I'm not digested fully with the last meal when I go to eat the next meal. And I can only imagine, and I assume this is probably, true, is your body doesn't necessarily waste it. I mean, maybe it does sometimes, but it's going to get absorbed. It's probably just not going to be as efficient as if you gave it the proper time to clear, allow the next amount of food to come in. Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. They're all the enzymes are, see, that's the thing. Our body's so advanced. It knows exactly what to do. Oh, this guy overate too much, like it gets to a point where there's certain enzymes that their feedback mechanisms, they'll tell this, cause there's some steps in glycolysis, as I mentioned in the previous one, they're irreversible. Once they pass this certain enzyme and it catalyzes into something else, it needs to go down that pathway. So there's enzymes at the previous step that say, hey, whoa, we have a lot already. Let's take this precursor before we convert it to, the final irreversible step, make it go down this way. We'll shuttle it down to this pathway and we'll use it for nucleic acid synthesis, or we'll use it for muscle, muscle building or something other than producing ATP. You know what I'm saying? And it gets to the point where, let's say I'm eating too much sugar. After a while, the buildup of those sugars and the enzymes say, all right, this is so much. We're going to go into protection mode, and you're going to throw up. Have you ever overate, you feel sick, you throw up? It's your body saying, look, we have too much energy. Yeah, I'm sure.
That happened this last off season. But I think I got to a point of like systemic overfeeding where I had metabolic dysfunction. I had all the blood pressure started to go up, lethargy throughout the day. This is like the trickle down of that, if overconsumption over a period of time when your body isn't utilizing, like, it's not that my consumption really changed. It's just like my body just got, I don't know, bombarded too much for too long.
Right.
And now I know what to do when that happens. Like you do a mini diet, you bring your calories or your carbohydrates down in half for a couple of weeks to get resensitized. But
Right.
I was just like, I'm just going to keep pushing. And so I had a lot of that, and I had, no appetite. I was gagging on my food, and I would be at the gym. I would throw up
Oh yeah.
or get close to throwing up. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I've experienced that for sure, where I'm just kind of pounding food and eating on top of a meal and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you gave some background as why that is.
Oh
I'm sure it causes. I mean, it obviously did with myself, and it does with other people, is systemic problems over time. If you chronically do that,
yeah.
acutely, like just doing it for a day, you might throw up, but then
Right.
you're looking at serious problems if you do that over a long period of time. And I mean, I think
Start
that's
oversaturating the receptors, and then problems like
diabetes.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, High buildups of plaque in the arteries and
Oh, yeah.
a host of other things. Yeah, it doesn't feel good either at all. I know that for a fact. So
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
something I want to watch in the future and stop trying to be like a meathead and like I'm just going to push and get
For-
bigger. And it's like you need your insulin sensitivity to get big. Like people don't, they forget about that, and they get to a point where they are really hindering themselves. You're not properly digesting and assimilating the carbohydrates that you're consuming. So
Right. And then you're not restoring glycogen properly and stuff like that. So there's a
right.
load of problems when it comes down to carbohydrate metabolism if you don't utilize it correctly.
Yeah. I think if you can get to a point where you build your body up to that, and
Oh, yeah.
and if you're at a point where you're eating 800 grams of carbohydrates and you're not, like, you're just topped off, like your body doesn't have a demand for it.
Right.
Your body doesn't have a demand for it, or you've gotten to a point where your body maybe has been bombarded too long with too much food. It's time to kind of pull back for a little bit before you can do that again. I mean, it
Right.
takes time. You don't just become Jay Cutler overnight eating 1,200 grams of carbohydrates and utilizing all that. I mean,
Right.
I think you can, you want to get the most out of the least if you can, and you don't have to be eating ridiculous amounts. And, once you start becoming elite, yeah, you want to be able to train your metabolism, so to speak, to be able to handle that load of food.
Right.
I was watching a video by Jeff Nippard
Oh, I
not
like
too long
it.
ago.
Yeah.
He puts out great content, and he was talking about a study, and it would take me forever to find it, but where they talked to, it was like a kind of a case study, and they asked top level bodybuilders, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the last podcast. They asked top level bodybuilders, like how many carbohydrates they ate, and they correlated the winningest bodybuilders, like the guys placing the highest shows, were eating the most carbohydrates going into the shows,
Mhm.
which is interesting. I mean, I don't know, we can draw any conclusions based on that, but they are, maybe their actual muscle size has something to do with the carbohydrates that they're able to actually assimilate and utilize correctly. I can only hypothesize that, but
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume you're not going to look very big if you're only dieting down to a show for 50 carbohydrates. So
Right. Right. You're not going to look full. You're not going to, the muscle bellies aren't going to be full and stuff like that.
yeah,
I mean,
definitely. And I think some of these guys out of Kuwait, I've listened to like Brandon Curry talk about his coach.
Oh, yeah.
And I've worked with coaches in the past, and they'll run you down for a long period of time. So like they'll run 50 grams of carbs or 0 grams of carbs for long periods, extended periods. And it's interesting listening to Brandon Curry's coach, and like all those guys out of Kuwait here. Let me pull up them on the screen.
Yeah. Kuwait's getting into bodybuilding pretty heavy over there.
They got a great bodybuilding scene over there, man.
Yeah, I hear a lot of athletes.
I don't know. Would you, if you got an invite to Kuwait? I mean, you're not as into bodybuilding as I am, but if you got a invite to Kuwait, would you take it?
Would you?
Man, I think I already kind of live in a bubble here.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. You know what? You don't realize what isolation like that would do to you. I mean,
right.
Let's see. Let's say Oxygen Gym. No, let's say Brandon Curry. I think that it might have an inverse effect if you're someone who can't handle that,
Yeah. I think, I mean, dude, again, like just your mental health too has such a big role. People are starting to finally understand in terms of hormone release and certain things like that. Damn, he looks really good, man.
Yeah.
God.
So, okay, if I can get the source image, shit. Okay. Yeah, I mean, a lot of their athletes, and it would take me a second to find Victor Martinez,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but when Victor Martinez went out there too, it's
He
just
won
they're
the
just so
Olympia,
full.
yeah.
But I was listening to what was that?
He won the Olympia too. No, Victor Martinez.
Did he?
He won 1 year, didn't he?
No, I think Dexter won
Oh,
one
I'm
year. I
thinking of
think he got really close.
Dexter
Dexter
Jackson,
Jackson
right?
won 1 year. He snuck in there, but he got
Yeah,
Victor. I think got really close 1 year, and so he did a comeback and he went to Kuwait and he had the same like this fullness. But
yeah,
I'm kind of starting to realize that one thing that these coaches do is they manipulate carbohydrates a lot. But
mm,
what Brandon was saying his coach does is that he um anytime Brandon got too flat, he would load him back up with carbohydrates. He said his coach doesn't like seeing him flat,
right.
which is really, really interesting. And I don't know if that has, and then they're dieting into these shows on ridiculous amounts of carbohydrates, and they're using the workload to kind of fuel the fat loss.
Right.
So I don't know. They're kind of doing things a little differently. I think the isolation has something to do with it. Let me stop.
Yeah, could very well
I think
could
the
be.
isolation has something to do with it out there. Maybe access to better drugs, which may be part of the equation, and some of the knowledge that they have out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really interesting to hear about that. And another guy, Patrick Tour, right now who's coaching like James Hollingshead and Ian Vaere, Chris Bumstead's coach,
Okay.
and a lot of these guys that are really full.
Yeah.
What he does is when they get, like I was talking about with that symptoms of metabolic dysfunction, or they're getting not utilizing carbohydrates, he'll mini diet them and then push their food back up, and it's kind of translating to this really full round
Muscle
look
belly
on the
type.
physique. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I don't
it
know.
could very well have to do with maybe restarting the whole insulin, dropping carbs down, keeping the glucagon somewhat high and
Yeah.
keep insulin very low and steady.
Yeah.
And maybe carbing up your body just kind of whoa, it's here we go again. And then,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's
It's
hard
it's
to
it's
tell.
it's it's ready to go. I mean, the same thing with if you're using anabolics is you don't run them blast all year. You take breaks periodically, and then I mean, even Stan, I worked with him for a year, but he was talking about how he works with the strongmen, and he said he has to bring their weight down for a period of the year, or they'll become problematic. Their body can't handle it, and they
Right.
can't digest and assimilate carbohydrates correctly and things like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
It has to be a balance, and in my
yeah,
head, I mean, because I was thinking, I always wonder, I'm like, damn, well, what if you could cut year round, or if you could bulk year round, why don't people do it? It's like a cycle thing.
yeah.
It's just not healthy for the body to
No, and I think the
overload.
body is kind of like cyclic like that. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's just like it just can't handle being there for too long, and you need to
Right.
just take
A
some
lot of
time off and
stress in
take
the
a
body.
break.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe you're pushing your cortisol up. Your
I'm
body
sure.
automatically, I'm sure it's working overtime. Your liver's trying to, because regardless, homeostasis is going to say, like your body's going to maintain the same internal temperature. That it's going to break down food. It's going to do certain things. But
Right.
if you put it under stressful conditions, or other, let's say you add on certain conditions to put more pressure on the body. Yeah, it won't change right away, but you're making it work twice as hard. You might be hindering recovery.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I think that's why what you do is you kind of like you push up to this like maybe a new weight. Say you're trying to mass and you push up to a new weight.
Right.
You maybe hold that for a little while.
Yeah.
Or you may come down a little bit, like reduce your carbohydrates, but then try to hold that weight for a little while and try to make that kind of your new level. Because if you go up here, it's going to be, that's going to be a shock to your system. And then if you can hold that baseline for a little bit longer, I mean, look at it. It's worked for me on this, like my weight, my settling point right now, I'm sitting around 236, right? Or so. And that's, I've done that to myself. Like I probably my settling point before was 175 or something like that. Like it's taken years to do that. But now
Right.
this is where my body is like comfortable sitting at. Like this is where
Right.
I, kind of just hang around. Well, I would probably say a little bit heavier, 240. I still kind of have a big appetite here.
Yeah.
But my settling point is, I've manipulated it to be able to be that high from, years of going up and down, going up and down. So yeah, that's interesting.
Oh yeah.
On that, so I kind of intercepted you there with the carbohydrate metabolism. Is there anything else like, so past the liver,
Right.
should I turn on Siri? Hold on. Past the liver, is there anything else like that we should be aware of, or I don't know?
So Yes and no. So once it gets to the liver, that's it. That's pretty much where the normal routine for every carbohydrate starts. It's usually glycolysis. There's it. If you look at it, there's pathways. It's all branched. It's not like you have like 8 pathways and it chooses one and goes down it, right? So you got one that branches off into a bunch of other things depending on whatever enzyme or step it's at. So let's say you eat a grain of rice and stuff, that the breaking down what makes it slower and it releases energy slower is the time it takes to convert it over to glucose in the liver. So you're getting more of a steady breakdown of carbohydrates, which is good because you're not, your insulin isn't getting spiked because there's not so much blood sugar entering it at one time. So little by little keeps the insulin steady. So, bodybuilding, it's beautiful when you know how carbohydrates work and how to use them properly because, like insulin spiking, certain things you could eat. If you have your carbohydrates totally messed up, you could be eating the same amount of carbohydrates as say you're eating 300 a day. And the other person could be eating 300 a day, but they could be maximizing the timing and whatever type of carbohydrate they're using and just get way more gains due to
Yeah. You know what? I agree with that. So, the scientific community, there isn't a consensus on this right now, because when you're looking at total calories, which calories are king. So if you consume that 300 grams, like if it fits your macros crowd will probably argue that it doesn't necessarily matter when you consume that.
Right.
To an extent, I don't want to like make this argument that like the if it fits your macros crowd is stupid or like they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Or they're just like, it just nothing matters. I think that's what kind of people try to put them in this box of like, it's just calories. But I think that there are some people who are like, more evidence-based in their approach with if it fits your macros. But I would definitely argue that there is some optimality, and it's not going to be like, if you're not losing weight, don't look at your carbohydrate timing first. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like look at your total calories, right? Don't think that it's inherently carbohydrates first. Now, if you are maybe a bodybuilder who is like trying to maximize the amount of carbohydrates that you're digesting, assimilating, that are getting shuttled to your muscles, then I think that's where that becomes really important. Or an athlete, that's when carbohydrate timing becomes really important. Absolutely. I don't necessarily think that general pop, it's too important, although it may be, and if maybe it affects, say, those spikes and drops do make you tired. I know I was just hanging out with a buddy of mine the other day, and his girlfriend was saying that like she'll eat a large amount of carbohydrates, and I'm sure a lot of people agree with this. Like after like Thanksgiving dinner, you eat a large amount of carbohydrates and you get tired.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's got to have some effect. I mean, or even just a large bolus of food.
I'm actually happy you said that. I shoot off on a quick tangent. It's actually funny because they're looking at like over a Thanksgiving meal. They're like, oh, the turkey makes you tired. The tryptophan.
Oh yeah, tryptophan. Yeah, I've heard that.
But it's actually, that's not true. There's more tryptophan in chicken. What usually makes you tired after Thanksgiving is all the fucking calories you're consuming.
Yeah, the bolus of food. I mean,
you're eating so much food that your body's like, fuck, man.
You know what? Maddie brought this to my attention when I was bulking.
Yeah.
Why I was becoming lethargic. Think about it. Like, I mean, I think this is what it was. I can't remember, but your brain relies on glucose for energy, right?
It does. Yep.
And and obviously a large amount of blood volume goes to your stomach if you're constantly digesting food. So like what's happening, like your blood is not in your brain, it's in your stomach digesting all of the carbohydrates. I mean, that's where it all shuttles to. It's trying to take care of this mechanism. And she was saying that might be why like I was kind of fogged up and like why I was tired is because one, I might not be shuttling that glucose as effectively, but two, it's like the blood is in my stomach. It's not other places because it's too preoccupied with digesting food all day when I'm constantly throwing food at it. So
signal that's on, like, for example, there's certain hormones that say that regulate certain proteins to say, hey, look, he's getting food, get ready to start digesting, get ready to start breaking stuff down. So, and here's another thing on why, I don't know if I mentioned it the last podcast, but like the ketogenesis diet.
Yeah.
The reason why it works so well when you're depleting so many carbohydrates is it turns on a whole different metabolic pathway that isn't supposed to be turned on. So it turns on ketosis.
Right.
Which, remember, as you said, the brain can only use glucose. So if you're not ingesting glucose,
It's got to
then
convert
it
it, right?
has to make glucose. And what it does is it makes glucose from fat, because it could convert glucose from fat, but
not as efficiently as
right. It's not as
available.
preferred. Yeah. Yeah. They always say that the general rule of thumb is that carbohydrates are the preferred energy source of the body over fats.
Yeah. Specifically the brain too, right?
Especially the brain. You
Right.
can't, if you eat fat and we didn't have the ketogenesis mechanism, we would die. You know,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Our brain would be like, all right, there's no more glucose. You know what I'm saying?
Luckily, the body's really good at adapting to things.
Yeah, our body would say, all right, well, no problem. We'll just convert all the fat we have back to
and maybe some of the what is like the hierarchy? Like, would it go like glucose, protein, then fat, or like is there a hierarchy? Like, or you know, go ahead.
I'm sorry, in terms of, because it's hard to understand too. Like it depends on what's happening, what you're doing. So if I'm sitting down, let's say I'm sitting down all day, I'm not doing a thing. I could eat proteins, I could eat fat, I could eat carbohydrates, sugars, anything. But regardless, it's gonna break it down as energy first. The first thing it's going to do is it's gonna go to the places where it needs to go first. So usually it gets absorbed in the cells, because even though I'm sitting down, I'm just kicking it, my cells are constantly working, you know, and they need,
most definitely.
you know, that's
just sit up even if
calories is, right? Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to say. In my head, what would make sense is let's say we're depleted, our body's trying to turn on protein synthesis, trying to maximize gains. We have a bunch of micro tears we just worked out. I'm sure that the protein would get utilized and be absorbed directly by our muscles first.
Right. So you're kind of saying what's currently going on. It's going to fulfill the needs for that mechanism first, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But
so it probably is different when you're trying to go to sleep versus when you're awake or when you're waking up, right?
Correct. Correct. But even when you're sleeping, just to be sleeping, breathing, growth hormone is starting to be effective.
Yeah.
Your body's always saying, all right, well, let's convert this as energy and let's utilize it in the mitochondria cells. Let's package certain nutrients. So even if we're not doing anything, the body still needs energy to carry out normal function.
Most definitely. I mean, that's why your BMR, and I can't remember what the other term is, but the BMR and the other one that exists is the difference between sitting up and laying down. Because there's a calorie difference that you expend from literally the musculature that I use to sit up. And then obviously to fidget, like, move my hands and stuff.
Right.
It's different. Like you use more calories to literally sit up or to stand. So, and that's why people are using standing desks and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about people with different weights. They have different maintenance calories. It just means by them standing up, depending on how much they weigh, depending on something else, they need a different amount of calories.
Lean tissue and fat mass and things like that. All that affects the
I think total. I saw a study. Lean tissue is like the major energy. I think the more lean you are, the more muscle you have, the more energy and glycogen it could store. Which,
muscle is such an active tissue, right? It's like it requires a lot more energy than fat, because fat kind of just
kicks
sits there, right?
Just kicks it until it needs to be used.
Muscle's like active tissue. It always requires energy and glucose and all that. So that would make sense.
Yep.
I mean, that's why some of these bodybuilders can get away with eating ridiculous amounts of food and actually utilizing it and not getting fat. So that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then I asked the question in class because it's interesting to know. Let's say I have to search it up too. I'm sure there's studies on it, but it's tough depending on funding and stuff. But it'd be interesting to see. Let's say you're 200 pounds, the same amount of body fat as somebody that's 150. You have greater lean tissue. Could you store more caloric glycogen versus the other person?
That's really interesting.
Which I feel like you can, because that's why maintenance calories goes up for a person that's heavier, especially if they're leaner too.
Yeah.
By them maintaining more calories, I'm sure you could store more glycogen in the muscles.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, you would think that. I don't know. I mean, there's probably some caveats to that. Like, what's the thing? Like I can't think of the term right now. It's basically when you have it's a high flux of energy consumption. So like you're consuming a lot of energy, but you're also expending a lot of energy and you're utilizing it.
Right.
That's that I'm sure you do though. I mean, if the actual size of your muscle, like where do the receptor, like where does glycogen, like the storage, where does that sit? You know what I mean? On the muscle, do you know?
From what we know, it's stored. There's only two primary glycogen storages. One's in the liver, and the others are in the muscles. I don't
Do you
know.
know like where it is on the muscle? Like, is it like, or does it expand, or like, do you grow more? That's kind of what
we
you're
didn't
asking,
get that.
I think. Yeah.
That's what, you know what I'm saying? That's what I want to know is because I would assume the bigger it gets, the more muscle cells you have. You know, as you get bigger, the more muscle cells you have,
And the more glycogen can store. Yeah. I just wonder where the actual glycogen is stored on the tissue. And as you grow, like we were talking about, I mean, if you're talking about like hyperplasia, the growth of new muscle cells, do you also have the capacity growing with that of those muscle cells? It would make sense, right? You get more muscle, more, and even a new muscle cell, and now you can actually store more carbohydrates with that. You know, so yeah, that would be really interesting. I've heard Milos Sarka talk about it a little bit. He's like the total insulin carbohydrate dude, and I don't know what the number he was saying. He was saying like, you know, X amount, like 80 grams of carbohydrates is what your muscle stores, but his demands, like the amount he pushes into his athletes, obviously with exogenous insulin, he does like sometimes 200 grams of carbohydrates in a workout. He's pushing in them. So I don't know. He probably feels that the need is much higher for them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a ratio when it's compared.
Yeah, he has some like formula behind it that he's kind of come about that has logic to it. So I kind of want to look back into that because, you know, he was saying that you utilize this much and whatnot. That's what I wanted to. One more thing on before we get off the carbohydrate topic. Any insight on intra-workout carbohydrate or timing around workouts as far on your end?
Yeah, from my standpoint, and this all comes from knowledge from certain classes, but those are very basic on the like molecular level. But then there's certain studies that I read, because most of the information I get are usually from studies and kind of applied back into the classes. But I think the best thing you could do is I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm gonna like eat some simple sugars before a workout so I could spike my insulin and get energy, but that's like scientifically that's I don't, you should always spike it post versus pre.
Right.
You know, you want to keep the when it comes to intra, I know it's popular. A lot of people keep you know, I know you did for a while, right? You did the intra.
Yeah.
Spike.
I did intra. I've pushed my intra carbs as much as 100.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a reason for it not to, especially intra, when your muscles are being torn down and depleted, to refuel them with glycogen.
And it's right there when the muscle needs it, right? It's already in your bloodstream.
Right.
So.
Your body, you're pretty much just aiding your body. Like, let's say it's we're holding like a backpack full of water. We're drinking water. The water's going down, and you just give it more water. You can say, "Oh, great, I got more water." Remember, glycogen is strictly extra energy. Creatine, phosphate is extra energy. All the bonds, ATP, for example, the universal energy, you know, you get ATP from every macronutrient. You eat, gets converted to glucose, goes to pyruvate, enters citric acid cycle, ATP. ATP is energy, right? ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Phosphate, those phosphate bonds is where you get the energy. So when your creatine stored in your muscle, what it is, it's creatine phosphate. And it's helping give that phosphate bond to adenosine diphosphate, so ADP. And then the beauty of creatine is when your muscles are depleted of ATP and we need that extra phosphate bond, creatine is readily available to say, here, take my phosphate bond. And it'll detach as phosphate to bind onto the ADP to create more energy. That's where you get that quick burst of energy. You need that extra rep from the creatine.
It's there. Yeah.
It's there. Because it's saying, hey, take this bond real quick. Here you go. You know, a track athlete running the 100. They need that little extra push for energy. It's going to be the instant energy. You know, let's say, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say that depletes really quickly, right? Like
very quick. Like it shoots off. It shoots off in milliseconds compared to, let's say you eat carbohydrates, like a pre-workout meal, which I do too. I do a lot of oatmeal. It's steady. It's a steady form. But when you're pushing that extra rep, you're not getting that energy from carbohydrates that you just ate. You're getting it from the glycogen and the creatine phosphate.
Yeah.
Which is another misconception when people train fasted in the morning. Oh, I'm training fasted, so I'm guessing I'm relying on my fat for energy. But unfortunately, what I just learned is that's not the case. You know, it takes a total of about 3 days to fully digest and get rid of the energy that you eat. But you know, you eat that. It's 12 hours, right? So let's say it's 24 hours, and you work out. You still have that muscle glycogen. You still have that creatine phosphate that you need to initially get rid of. You need to be in a starved state for you to actually utilize fat for lifting. But
Yeah,
that concept's not true because you're going to be really, really tired, you know?
right. And then you're not going to be able to exert yourself as much. You're not going to be able to expend more calories because of that.
Right.
But what I have seen on the research on this, so the fasting thing has been completely debunked now, especially cardio too.
Yeah.
Because they found that, yeah, you do burn more fat during fasted cardio, but then you burn less throughout the day versus if you do it at a different time, it works the same way. It's like your body. So the energy net balance is still the same.
Same balance. Exactly. Yeah. It's like the high fat diet versus the high carb diet. I think the high carb diet is better initially, but you lose the same amount of weight on both diets when
you lose. Yeah. And it's your body's using different energy sources,
right.
Or utilizing it differently at different times of the day based on the diet too. Right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that translates to more fat loss just because you're burning more fat during that session. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's crazy because I remember when I like way back, I remember hearing that the opposite of it was increasing. You know, there was some hypothesis around it that it was like increasing fat burning throughout the day.
Right.
And that was why it was more effective, but it was never actually proven. And now they have evidence to show that you can do it whenever. And it's probably better to do it. I would say it's probably better to do it in a state where you're fed, because you're not, if you're really depleted, you're not thinking about food. You may have a little bit more energy, so you may be able to exert yourself more. So yeah, that makes sense. And same with training too, you know.
Same thing.
I know when I'm dieting, if I'm food focused, I can't fucking focus. I can't exert myself as much during training as well. So I always at least try to have something small. I know too, if people, if you have a trouble like eating something and then going into training, like you still feel full, or you get like indigestion. Two things you can do is either lower the food volume, look at the foods that you're eating during that. You know, if it's something that maybe causes digestive distress, stay away from it. Like oatmeal in large volumes can cause problems. And then two, you can just increase the window of time between that. And if it's like, if it takes you legitimately like 3 hours to like feel comfortable to train, then that's especially a good time where an workout carbohydrate drink might work really well, because then you're not actually going in not a fasted state, but you're not going in without having protein and actual energy for a long period of time prior to training. Because I would always recommend training with something in your system.
I would too. Generally, I would too. I mean,
and I think we're on the same page as far as how to set that up. I think people still have some confusion. So normally, you wouldn't want something that's going to clear really quickly. Like you're not going to just have protein and carbohydrates. You might want some fats. You might want some fibers in that pre-workout meal. You don't want something that causes digestive distress, though. You want basically that meal to be cleared within an hour so that you can go train. So like I've seen people use, I like to use whole foods, but you could use like a cream of rice with peanut butter and a whey isolate. I just use like a steak and a potato because that digests fine for me. And then I go and just maybe not a whole lot of fiber. Intra-workout. So they have done studies, and one of the studies I think was in cyclists, where they fed them a mixture of carbohydrates. So fructose, glucose, and their absorption rate was, I want to say like 50% faster.
Has to be pretty fast. Yeah.
So I do that intra-workout. I know Stan with the vertical diet had started doing that. He got it from George Lockhart, I believe, MMA coach. I believe that's who it was from, where he actually found. What was that?
That would make sense to do it intra, especially when it's a fast carbohydrate.
Yeah, no, I actually asked him. So I was at his seminar in November, and I was working with John Meadows at the time. John Meadows is really big on intra-workout nutrition, and they were talking about the post-workout shake and it being fructose, glucose, sodium, and a little bit of caffeine, right? Perfect. And I was like, could you do that intra-workout? Because I was already with John. I was doing just cyclic dextrin. Which is just a really, really simple carbohydrate, right? It's just really fast. And I was like, could you?
Oh, that doesn't spike, and it reacts.
It does. Right? I mean, I don't know actually the mechanism. I just know it's just like it's one of the fastest. If it could be faster than glucose, you know what I mean? Like it's just in your blood as soon as it hits the digestive tract. There's nothing.
Dextrin?
What was that?
What is it?
Cyclic dextrin.
Okay.
So I don't know the way,
with the gummy bears, it has dextrose. So I'm sure
dextro. Yeah. I listened to Milos Sarcev. Well, the hypothesis behind it was that it absorbed quicker, but Milos was talking about it, and he was talking about maybe that it's just glucose at the end of the day. So if you start drinking it 15 minutes before your workout, it's going to be in your blood. But I started doing that intra workout this last off season. So I would do thermotablets, so sodium. So I'm replacing my electrolytes while I'm training.
Right.
I would do a 3-to-1, I think, or 4-to-1 ratio of dextrose to fructose. So I would do orange juice and dextrose, and then I would also maybe do some EAAs in there. So I had some, and then for a period I was using some exogenous insulin to drive that in.
To get it,
And I was doing that intra workout. So instead of doing it post workout, just while you're training. And I think Damon over at UNLV that's what his not on exogenous insulin, but on dextrose fructose. I think he's studying that for his PhD research. I don't know exactly how it works, but I kind of want to talk to him about that because I'm really curious how that worked out. But in hypothesis, it would make sense. And obviously, I'm just trying to get the best. So I don't know. That's what I was doing this last off season. As far as if you are getting post or intra workout nutrition, the timing on your post workout meal might not be as important. I would say if you aren't, it is probably pretty important to get some carbohydrates and maybe a low fat protein source in there. Just because once you tear everything down, you need to get that.
To get it going. Yeah. The faster you get it going, the better you get it going. You need to restore glycogen. You got to,
Yeah. And then one of my favorite post workouts, I'll do a mixture of glucose and fructose again. Assuming that maybe my absorption is still, you're probably pretty covered unless like you're like myself who was taking exogenous insulin, maybe even post workout, you're going to kind of get another clearing. You could probably shuttle some of that if you're doing it properly. But so I was doing like rice with honey and like lean ground beef. That was like really good. Or pineapple with lean ground beef.
I would also mix sometimes I would mix my carbs where I down a simple to get it in there, but then I'd have another slower one breaking down.
I mean, it makes sense. Definitely kind of have that like trickle of glucose going in.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of all I wanted to talk about really as far as like carbohydrates. I think we got a good amount covered there. So let's go over the Instagram questions, and then I had a buddy ask some questions too.
Perfect.
Hold on one sec here.
Did my brother ask any good questions again? Or?
No, he didn't this time. I heard your dad liked the video. He saw it.
Silence of the Lambs one. A podcast. I said, check it out. So funny.
I know. I want to go talk to him soon.
Oh yeah, he actually just did the keto diet for a while.
Oh really? How'd that work for him?
Dude, he lost a lot of weight, so he stayed strict with the carbs low.
The thing is he keeping it off?
That's a good question. I have to ask him. He just got off. I told him when he got off, I told him just to try to do intermittent fasting and just keep his calories pretty low. Because I hear he was telling me that's a common thing for keto is you tend to gain all that weight after you get off it.
Well, so that's not just keto, that's all diets. That's the statistic for any diet. But the thing is with your dad is maybe he doesn't find keto sustainable. If you like embark on a diet and you don't see yourself doing it long term, you're just going to gain the weight back after because you're just going to go back to your normal habits. Like it's really difficult to, if you haven't built those habits already, to start that after you stopped keto. Or whatever, vegan diet or low carb, high fat or high fat,
It's also probably in my head, it's probably like another 50-50 type mental thing. Like I just got off a diet. I'm going to kind of loosen up. And then next thing you know, you're eating the same shit you were before.
Yeah, exactly. And you've gained the weight back.
Especially with calories being even lower, and then you're eating the same. You're just gaining maybe twice as fast,
Yeah. So I think that there's like a hierarchy, and the thing that you need to look at first when looking at a diet is sustainability, right? Like if I send a diet over to someone and they're like, I can't do this, I don't eat these foods, whatever. their adherence is going to be shit. Like they might do it for 2 to 3 weeks, and I've seen this so many times, and then they just fall off.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, what was that?
A lot of coaches push that too. I always see it. Oh, with this, you have to eat like this. You have to. And it messes with people's timing and stuff. And it's like, dude, really?
Definitely. No, there's
what they need, you know?
I mean, they studied all of the popular name diets: zone, keto, carnivore, vegan, low carb, high fat, low fat, high carb. They studied all of them and compared them, and they found no difference in weight loss amongst all of them when calories were controlled, when people are eating in deficit.
It just shows your body. Your body's so good at adjusting to what it needs to do. You know, to
most definitely. And that's, what we're talking about is like how it's using energy sources and things like that. But that being said, that also shows us that it's what the best diet is, the one that you'll follow, like what is the most sustainable for you, because the weight regain statistic is like something like, I want to say like 90%. So like people, it basically says that people can lose weight, but over a course of 3 years, they will gain that weight back. And that is 90% of people. So, or I think even 95, like it's ridiculous. So that means that people who are trying to lose weight are not successfully doing it. So I think the best thing for him, if you have a conversation with him, is just to be like, hey, well, what do you enjoy doing? Does he normally fast? Does he normally kind of look at his eating patterns? Does he normally not eat until noon? Okay, then fasting is a good option. Does he like to eat carbohydrates? Okay, maybe we might need to work some in there. You know what I mean? And maybe if it's your macros is a good approach for him or something like that. So it would probably take some troubleshooting, but and if you had a plan that might work, like if you were like, okay, I'm gonna do keto and then I'm gonna just to get the initial weight off, and then I'm gonna jump over to a fit your macro style diet with some carbohydrates, or maybe slowly reintroduce some carbohydrates in. So it could work in that. I
recommended to him a gram of test a week and 4,000 calories.
That'll fucking work. A gram of test, some T3, some growth.
Some growth, some insulin.
I'm like, so the keto diet's working for you. He's like, and the gram of test.
I'm eating 4,000 fucking calories. You know what I'm saying? Crazy. Like, oh shit.
All right. Oh, that's funny. So okay, we got another SARMS question. What Alapaz, Marcus Alapaz, he asks, what are your thoughts on SARMS? I actually looked at this question before, and I mean, we asked, it was SARMS for women, and I did some more research after we did it. What are your thoughts from your personal experience, and then I'll talk about mine.
I mean, my thing with SARMS is it looks good on paper. Like it seems like they're starting to troubleshoot it and stuff. It's still relatively new. So whether it works, like it's very dependent, because something could work in vitro, could work in a petri dish, and it could not translate. In my experience personally, I think it translated. I gained a notable amount of strength and stuff. And that's without, when I did it.
Any weight gain?
So I would say 8 to 10 pounds. But I mean, again, at the time, my diet wasn't optimized, and I was just eating. I was training hard. I was getting good gains. But it'd be interesting to see. It'd be nice to do a kind of like just a guinea pig, study where I keep my diet absolutely the same in terms of, maintenance calories, and I train the same. And then I get on a cycle of SARMs with the same amount of calories, and then compare the two.
Get bloods before and after too. That'd be really cool.
Exactly. Really see what it's doing on a very molecular level.
Yeah, I think some people are doing that now. I think that would be really cool.
Oh yeah.
No, so I agree with you. I think that's pretty consistent with what I hear. About SARMs. I would say in theory they are great. Like if we can get just the androgenic muscle, like androgen in the muscle, like effects,
right,
and that would be golden, right? We don't want any of the androgenic effects like in our hair or our scalp, like balding or hair growth all over our body, and all the acne, all the negative side effects. So if we can get it to the point where it's potent enough and it doesn't cause damage in other areas, then that would be great. But there is a correlation with it affecting your lipids and your HDL. So that's one thing to be aware of. Like I said in the last podcast, we can predict what happens when you take testosterone. I think a lot of people who are embarking on that are afraid of like needles, but it's like it's the safest for that reason too, because it's like it's bypassing your liver. I mean, it's not bypassing it, but
damn near to, or not to liver, but to the injection, it's the muscle. So at least it's like with orals, at least and stuff, your liver it tries to break it down. But I think it's, what is it? They're all methylated so that it's protected against being broken down in the liver.
Yeah.
Which what gives you those high liver enzymes. Your liver's like, what the fuck is this shit, you know?
Yeah. So I think anything that's going to have to be ingested orally is going to cause more negative ramifications. And if you get it to a dose where it's effective enough, it might be causing those problems. So one thing to consider when taking anything is going to be your health. Like, you're potentially taking years off your life when you take stuff. So I'm assuming you're considering taking them. There's probably a lot you haven't optimized with diet and training to be even looking at those. But I would say right now, they're an option, but probably not the first thing I would go to, as far as that. And if you are going to do that, I would probably, especially if you're, relatively new to training, I would probably be getting advice from a professional or someone who's done them before, or not just your average gym bro who's taken them, and kind of just get some actual professional advice, maybe someone who has coached some people and has used it correctly. Because obviously we're not going to have any doctors advising people on how to take these per se, maybe an HRT clinic, but always understand that there is a inherent risk when you take anything, to modify your hormones and to gain muscle that isn't, outside of food, basically. So yeah, I would just leave it at that. What were you going to say?
It's really all a risk reward, if there's a lot of side effects, if it's super, then you're going to get more reward. But like, it's another thing, with growth hormones or with SARMs, like SARMs are, the side effects are relatively low. Yeah, that's because it's only binding to one specific, maybe a few specific receptors. So you're not going to get a very optimal, like a crazy ass transformation. That's, testosterone hormone itself, it regulates more than just, muscle building. So it helps a lot of precursors. It helps with carbohydrate as well.
Different processes. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what the aromatization of it is, but I would assume that you still want a good amount of aromatization. I think people are afraid of that, but I just tested my levels, and my estrogen was at, or I think estroidal was at 97. And that's proportionate to the amount of testosterone that's in my bloodstream. And that's because I'm using test as a base. So if you don't have that, that could definitely be, like we talked about in the last podcast, that can, the neuroprotective benefits of estrogen aren't there, especially if you're spiking your androgen levels. And I know it's more specific to muscle, but it could be a potential side that we're not looking at just yet. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I would probably just advise not taking them. And if you need some help with nutrition, just hit me up. I can help you optimize those things first before you even consider that. Because like Matt just said, it's a risk reward. You're potentially looking at taking years off your life, especially if you're someone who's genetically predisposed to have some of those conditions. So you got to really be serious about it. I mean, I'm well aware of that. I've potentially taken, 5, maybe 10 years off my life because of the lifestyle I live, and being a bodybuilder. But, that's because this is literally what I do and I love to do it. Now, if you're just trying to get a beach body or, get kind of in shape, you want to be, weighing that out a little more, you know what I mean? So yeah, definitely consider that. And if you need help, man, just hit me up. I'll help you out with some of that stuff. My sister asks, chicken, let's see, I said chicky nugs or chicky tenders. She's asked this question before. What's your preference there?
I think I like the nuggets more, only because I could get a better dip ratio.
Fuck yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The tenders are great, but like I get the tip with some ketchup and I'm like, all right, now what?
Yeah, dude. No, I agree. Chicken nuggets all day. Dinosaur chicken nuggets, bro.
Yep. Yeah.
I remember looking at the fucking bag when I started working out, and the protein, like they have a good amount of protein in them because they're some breast meat and other mixtures of parts of chicken.
Yeah.
So I would eat them and I grew, like I got bigger. So, I mean, it worked. So chicken nuggets all the way. That was my original, the OG mass gaining diet was chicken nuggets.
Yeah. Yeah. To 20 chicken nuggets, throw them in the microwave, call it a day,
Fuck yeah, dude. I'll eat the whole bag.
Yeah.
There was one time, my parents were going to kill me. There was one time where I got really fucking high and I came home and I I ate a whole bag of chicken nuggets with like honey mustard, and I had the TV next to me, and I just passed out with like the bag next to me. I don't know why I had the bag with me. And I was like, my parents probably found me passed out on the bed, like with honey mustard on my face, and they were like, this motherfucker is high.
Yeah.
He definitely smoked weed.
In here, you know, you're like, what the?
Oh man, they're probably gonna watch this, so good. Is eating complex? This Kashane the Great, guy I used to work with or work near in Santa Monica. He said, is eating complex carbs a good idea when cutting? What's your perspective?
So. I mean, my thing is again, the overall, when it comes down to it, overall, the most important thing is going to be your calories in versus calories out.
Yep.
Whether you want to manipulate your carbohydrates, some people do their fats. I keep my fats consistent. I kind of manipulate my carbohydrates, whether I'm bulking. But yeah, I mean, relatively, like whether you're bulking, whether you're cutting, I think the nutrient timing, whatever complex carbs or simple sugars you're doing, should stay consistent. Complex carbohydrates throughout the day until it comes to about maybe intra or post workout, then I would go ahead and spike up the insulin, keep it simple. But regardless, I think what really it comes down to is the amount of carbohydrates, not necessarily complex. I think always you should try to keep insulin relatively relatively consistent instead of going up and down and up and down. Try to keep, you know. So
I agree 100%. So I mean, one, you wouldn't want to be eating all of your carbohydrates in one meal of the day. I wouldn't recommend that, at least. And that's from like a satiety perfect perspective. But I would probably look at this from satiety perspective, given my perspective from dieting, is if you eat a lot of foods that contain simple sugars, a lot of highly palatable, highly processed foods, your tendency to overeat those things, especially when you're in a caloric deficit, is really high. So you eat those foods and you want more of them. Those foods are also not filling, so they, per volume, they if you eat a Pop-Tart versus a potato, a Pop-Tart is not going to fill you up the same way, even if the calories are equated and the carbohydrates are equated. Especially if you have a small amount of carbohydrates that you're allotted because you're in a large deficit. You don't want to be filling your calories with simple sugars. I would always recommend fruit. Fruit is good, and fruit has fiber and other things in it, especially if you're not drinking fruit juice, but you're actually having fruit, like whole fruit. That's a good thing to have in small quantities while you're dieting. And I would still consider it maybe not complex, but it takes longer to break down with the accommodating fiber and other things in fruit. But yeah, I would definitely say the same thing. Try to keep your carbohydrates more complex, but don't look at it like that. I would say look at your carbohydrates as you can pull up the satiety scale for food and try to pick carbohydrates off of that, especially when you're cutting. And inverse, if you're trying to mass, is foods that are less satiating, like maybe a white rice. And generally those foods are going to be complex by nature. So it's kind of just happened by picking foods that are more filling. Whole foods, generally sweet potato, carrots, squash, things like that, tend to be more filling. So try to pick a majority of your carbohydrates from those types of foods if you are cutting. And if you want to fit in some flexibility and have a Pop-Tart, be aware of one, your ability to do so. Like, can you do that and still maintain a deficit, not go off the rails? And two, if you are truly someone who is really, really hungry all the time, then it's not a good idea. Because I've tried doing flexible dieting, but my appetite is so ravenous. Like, it's so crazy. I have to be eating potatoes and oatmeal and things like that to kind of subdue it a little bit. If I eat a Pop-Tart and I take away some of my daily carbohydrates for that, I will most likely either binge eat or eat off my plan. So that's, I agree. And that's two different perspectives on that. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to have a good amount of complex, especially when you're dieting. Francisco Burnell asks, I remember your goal was to fill out a 2X shirt. What's your next goal? I guess my goals aren't as vain. It's not like my goals were ever like really, that was like my primary goal. I mean, my goals, I'm not going to really like say all of them, because I think some people would think they're kind of ludicrous. But my goal right now is to get a pro card. I'd like to see this podcast kind of pick off the ground, because I have a message that I want to portray out there. you know, I want to kind of grow a brand and help people with that. So that's kind of what's in my face right now. It changes all the time, but that's really what, you know, I'm looking at is hopefully getting a pro card in the next couple of years and you know, working on building a business and creating financial freedom. So how about you? What is your goal, you know, in the next couple of years or moving forward? Like, what do you want to do after school and stuff?
Honestly, right now, it's very interesting. I mean, it seems to me that it's really me just kind of seeing what opportunity I have, and I'm kind of just taking them. You know, my initial goal was, once I got my bachelor's, was to get some workforce experience, get into industry, maybe lab tech job, and then slowly go back to school. But the opportunity was presented, and it's just kind of like a thing where it's like, if I were to pass it up, I don't know if I would go back. So I guess right now my initial goal would be, I think I want to finish my master's, and then depending on what I learn and what I could apply to the real world scientifically and stuff like that, might just shoot and get my PhD right then and there, depending on what I see fit, or just, you know, possibly just kind of getting into the workforce and then just kind of figuring out, or what do I want to do? What am I, you know, really focused in? But eventually, at the end of the day, I really want to get into nutritional biochemistry and stuff like that, as it relates to sports nutrition. Because the thing about sports nutrition is the funding on it is very low. Yeah. But with obesity being so high in America and all this stuff, is bodybuilding, weightlifting, exercise, nutrition right now, it's been underlooked in the past like century, but now it's more labs are starting to focus on nutritional research, phytochemicals, and it's just going like this.
Conversation is shifting. Definitely. I agree.
Absolutely.
And I'm with you there, man. Like I want to be involved in that to some extent too, alongside all this stuff. Like I mentioned in the last podcast, I definitely would want to be a part of like educating the youth in nutrition and finding out the things that are effective in creating sustainable habits. But I think and kind of the reason why I even approached you for this podcast is I think there is a possible like way where our careers will intercept at some point. I mean, they're kind of doing it right now, but you know, down the line too. And I think we have some of the same things that align. So there's definitely the opportunity for a partnership in the future. Hopefully we'll be looking back at this one day with our fucking, I don't know, like 20, 40, 60,000 square foot facility with the gym and the nutrition center. Research center, you know what I mean? Like, but you know, we can fucking dream. We'll see. One thing I would say is you know, that's I agree with that. And I don't want to give you unsolicited advice, but maybe it would take be smart to, like, once you get your master's, like take a couple months off or like a semester or a quarter and just like kind of like just feel things out, you know, like maybe look at some internship opportunities, but then or ways to work in research, but then maybe, you know, just because one thing, like we were talking about the quarantine this last time, it's like when you're really with yourself, you really learn what the fuck you want. You know what I mean? Oh yeah.
So then you start to dream, you know, you start to think back and picture yourself in certain situations. Yeah. You know, and when you picture yourself in those situations, you're like, oh wow, I never really thought of this, but now that I do, this is really cool. This is
or you realize that like the thing that you've been kind of like holding on to, you're like, maybe I don't want to fucking do that. You know, maybe I want to do this over here. So it's really important to take that time off with yourself, you know, and especially because you've been going so fucking hard for so long. Like, I commend you for that shit. But like, I'm like, hey Matt, you want to hang out? You're like, no, I'm in lab. I'm like, hey, Matt, you want to hang out like 12 o'clock on Christmas? You're like, yeah, I'm in lab right now. I'm like, what the fuck?
You know? So and I'm excited for it to translate, but I want it to translate in a thing that I'm passionate about, which is why I started. So.
Yeah, it'll fucking connect, man. I know it will. That shit, something's gonna fucking pop in your head when you're like, that's fucking it. You know what I mean? Like if you keep working at it, you know what I mean? And it kind of seems like the dots connect as you do this. You know what I mean? As you get more involved, like the you know, as the opportunities present themselves when you put yourself in a position to, you know, be able to accept them, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I agree with that a lot. That's cool, man. Okay, my buddy Jordan asked a bunch of questions. He was probably some of the best questions he asked on the last podcast. But first question he asked is, why is everybody so afraid of estrogen? And where do you think the stigma behind it comes from?
Personally, I think it's when you're taught, you're taught what differs from men and women. Men, the sex hormone for men is testosterone. The sex hormone for women is estrogen. So naturally, you would say, "Oh God, if I have estrogen, that means hormonally I would be, a woman." I think. Yeah.
So it's because men are sexist. I get it.
It's all science, baby. I love it. It's all science. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a big thing has to come down to just not really knowing what it's there for, just knowing, estrogen's for females, testosterone's for males, but that's not necessarily the case. It's very reciprocated. You need estrogen no matter what.
We talked about this, and I was kind of talking about it too. It's like, okay, think about when you first started training, right?
Right.
And especially if you're someone who took anabolics, especially too early on, like myself, like maybe I didn't, know a lot about them when I, totally misguided decision.
Right.
But okay, you've heard, Jim talk that estrogen, you have to take an AI because you're going to get side effects, you're going to get acne and all these other things. But what I've found from my personal experience is that, and I'm sure this is supported by the research, but it's not the estrogen that causes those side effects. It's the imbalance in influx of those hormones that causes that. Yep. So like if your testosterone is going like this, infrequent injections, if you are coming off without a PCT and your body's doing this, that's what causes those side effects. Or over, when those things are not in balance. And when you're taking just base testosterone, your body does a pretty good job at keeping those things in balance. There's enough aromatization, there's enough estrogen to testosterone in a good ratio. When you start fucking with that, that's when you start getting the side effects. I had a buddy, I'm not gonna say his name on here, but I was told him, because I used to be in the same boat, and I was like, why don't you take an AI? He's like, I just get side effects. And he was smarter than I was at the time, just from from listening to his body. Yeah. He was just like, dude, I break out. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to stop you from breaking out. And then, lo and behold, now I'm learning like estrogen is so important for the muscle building process. Derek, More Plates, More Dates, that guy that I mentioned in the last video, he does a lot of great kind of like case studies and reviewing research on his page. And he found a study in cattle where, they give cattle Phenoplex, which is trenbolone that bodybuilders use.
Yeah.
But they have the implants, but they did a study with the implants with estradiol with the trenbolone, because trenbolone doesn't aromatase. And they noticed there was almost no IGF-1 in the cattle that were taking trenbolone by itself, because there's no aromatization, there's no estrogen, which is crazy because you would think, oh, trenbolone is going to cause a spike in IGF-1, tons of muscle growth, whatever. But they saw significant more IGF-1 and significant more muscle growth in the cattle that had estradiol administered along with the Phenoplex, which is alone is crazy. And I can tell when myself, I mean, I went from, I grew with one coach from like probably lean mass only from like 200 to like 210, 215 when you really stripped off all the body fat. So I think we got up to 250 and I was pretty bad competition. So and then I went to Stand Flex. They were like, okay, no AIs, get all that shit out, get your gyno removed, and just don't fucking ever touch that stuff ever again. And I didn't. And I grew the most I've ever grown in a season ever, which would make no sense because I'm starting to get to a point where gains come on slower because of the amount of muscle that I have and I'm acquiring. And I went from 245 to 285 and with a better composition, more fullness, no side effects, no acne, without taking any tamoxifen or any of that shit. You know what I mean? So I don't know. The stigma, I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but the stigma comes, like you said, from, men associating that with female characteristics, sex characteristics, which I would say prolactin tends to cause some of those problems more so, and we don't diagnose it correctly. And it's just from not having enough actual understanding of how estrogen works in the body. Like we talked about the neuroprotective benefits of estrogen. If you don't have that understanding, you're just going to think it's bad. You're going to follow obviously that's something that has existed in bodybuilding for a long time, is taking aromatase inhibitors without any knowledge of your blood work, taking SARMS without any knowledge of your blood work. My last coach had me up at 80 milligrams at one point a day of tamoxifen. My fucking estrogen was undetectable. My HDL was gone. Like I had no HDL. Like I probably could have fucking had a heart attack at 20 years old because this motherfucker didn't know what he's doing. And it's so irresponsible. And that's what coaches are doing now.
it's more, and you could see it. I'm sure you could even testify. The coaches seem to be more and more concerned with the whole like, man, this is very hard. So they get that, yeah, I'm training you good, I'm training you hard. But they really, a lot of people, especially trainers and stuff, they really, are focused more on the, oh, they think it's very hard, I'm doing a good job, versus all right,
Bro,
well,
that is literally the embodiment of my last coach. Like,
yeah,
like I talked about it before. It's, he had me at 7 days of training, 2 hours of cardio a day, 2 hours of training a day, a ridiculous amount of drugs for an amateur competitor, but I was just kind of blindfolded, not like, I was just like, oh, this is what it takes at the time when I didn't have any better understanding.
right,
No, any background information, no studies, no nothing. It's just all like, running you into the ground and being able to not letting your body recuperate and all that stuff. Yeah, I agree. It's like they associate suffering with looking good. And it's like, no, like,
there's a lot of different things they could say, or, but yeah, go on. I totally agree with you here.
Well, I think there's a time and a place. Like, your training should be difficult, but fucking getting out of bed should not be difficult. You know what I mean? Like, standing up and walking shouldn't be difficult. When that becomes difficult, it's concerning, right? And that's where I was like, that's where I drew the line. I was like, dude, like I worked harder than I ever fucking worked in my life. I mean, to be able to even do that for, I look back, I felt like shit at the time. I was like, man, I don't have the balls to do it. I don't have the work ethic. I look back on that. I'm like, I commend myself for even being able to push myself for that long. I mean, I did that for 25 weeks, and towards the last 8 weeks.
You telling me too. You're like, I'm breathing hard getting out of bed, And
oh, no, I had to, like, if I had to pee, I would like be like, okay, like, you're going to get up like 20 seconds. And I would start counting down. I'm like, all right, you can do this. And like, I would have to like in the middle of the night. One morning I woke up and he had me inject like L-carnitine in my muscles. And then I would take all my fat burners, my T3 cleanse, all this shit, fucking, like ridiculous amount of shit before I had even put anything in my body, which I think is kind of scary too. Like, I don't have anything in my stomach, which I never really liked the concept.
Your body absorbs is all that.
Exactly. I'm like, first thing in the morning. And then I remember I was like, okay, I would put on my clothes, get ready to go to the gym. And I remember just getting cold. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get under the blanket and then I'm going to go in 5 minutes. Cause like, if I don't get this done, my whole day is gonna be thrown off. I have to do cardio, come back, eat, then go back to the gym. And I literally was shivering. It was like fucking 80 degrees in our small little apartment we had at the time. I was fucking shivering. I had all the blankets over me, and Maddie's next to me. Like, should I call a fucking ambulance? And eventually I like got up out of bed. Eventually got out of bed with like 2 sweaters on, and then drove to the gym and was able to somehow do my cardio. Like, it was ridiculous. But what the fuck? Like, I shouldn't be shivering. It's the middle of the fucking summer. Like, come on. My T3 was,
that's my your body telling you, yo,
you fucking stop what you're doing. No, I agree.
Okay. Please.
Yeah, really. So, I mean, I kind of listened and I've heard stories very similar to that, but I agree. It's from that old school bodybuilding mentality. You want your body to work for you, not against you. And there's times to work hard and there's times to rest. If you listen to like Chris Aceto, if he has an athlete who's run down, sometimes they'll be like, instead of saying more cardio, they'll be like, okay, take a day off, eat a burger. And then they look fucking better the next day. And it's like, no shit, their body was getting burnt out. You got to understand that, So I agree 100%. That's definitely part of it, is like it's like taking anti-estrogen and your joints hurting is like a good thing. Like you're supposed to be in pain. You're supposed to hurt everywhere.
I don't
think it's the case.
Your appendages sore, they're dried out, but
you're not getting a hard on. Great. Sex is for the weak.
That's normal,
What do you think is the most common micronutrient deficiency or deficiencies?
Common ones? It might be, I would say maybe, it's very hard to say. I mean, I'm not too familiar with micronutrients as a whole, but maybe vitamin D as a precursor, maybe something like that. A lot of it comes from the sun, but
I agree.
If you have a well-balanced diet, most of the time you get a very good amount of micronutrients.
I think the problem is not a lot of people have a well-balanced diet.
Right.
I agree. Vitamin D3. I don't know what the actual amount of sun exposure you get to get a good amount of actual like blood vitamin D3. I just got my vitamin D3 hydroxy 25 test. And I had 60, and which is good. Like I've been trying to supplement with it, but not supplement too much. Like I was taking 10,000 IUs for a while, I went bumped down to 8,000 because it's summertime. So I've been trying to stand out. I've did at least 3 times a week for 10 minutes. I get like sun exposure without like a shirt on. So I'm trying to actually get more natural vitamin D3, if that makes sense.
Do you know if vitamin D has an upper limit at all? Does it?
It does, because it's fat soluble, right? But it's very uncommon for people to be. I think it's very uncommon. I know my mom at one point was taking vitamin D3, and her doctor hypothesized she had some health problems from it. Hypothesized that it might be from vitamin D, but looking back on it, I really doubt it. It could have been something else. Because it's really hard to get adequate levels, especially people who, I mean, you live in Reno, so I'm sure you get a lot of sun. I live in California, and I was low for a while. So if you're not consciously trying to get in the sun and supplementing with a good amount of vitamin D3, probably low. It's important to do a test. But I would agree. I think a lot of people are deficient because there are foods that have it. I think a lot of fatty fish do have vitamin D3, but to get an adequate amount, and especially if you're a clean eater, you don't eat foods that tend to have fortified amounts, like cereals and maybe some milks and stuff like that. But you need to probably be supplementing with that for sure. I give all my clients vitamin D3 for sure, and getting some sun exposure. So I agree. That's a really common, you hit the nail on the head right there. That's a really common one, I think. And that has so many trickle down side effects. That one is most important, I would say, as far as like depression and anxiety and energy level. There's so many things. I'll link it down below if I can remember to, where Stan talked about, he did a whole rant on vitamin D3 and how it's actually acts as a hormone, not as a vitamin in the body, because it's so important for a lot of functions. So that one, I would say with the prevalence of people thinking that red meat is bad, heme iron, and a lot of the other things, zinc, magnesium, a lot of those things probably are pretty prevalent too. I was just watching a podcast earlier, and it was Paul Saladino and another, like, unfortunately I can't remember her name. It was like Nina something. And he pulled up a study, and he was showing that red meat consumption has gone significantly down, but our incidence of heart rate has not declined along with that. So obviously, I mean, it's correlation. And then our consumption of processed vegetable oils has gone up too. I think there is some correlation there. But obviously with that decreased consumption in red meats, there's going to be a deficiency in heme iron, and many other problems. And I've heard a lot about like women becoming anemic. A lot of pre-contest women, especially, their coaches will cut out red meat. So I would say that, I mean, that's kind of why I like the vertical diet in the first place, because I think a lot of bodybuilding style diets don't address micronutrients. But I would say probably, especially for women, that's really important, heme iron, and just red meat in general. So I would probably put it there. Anything else that I can think of? Iodine is another one, especially athletes lose that through their sweat, and that controls your thyroid function. Salt as well. People demonize salt, but only people
they really do. But salt is so important.
100%. And people who are salt sensitive are the ones that are getting blood pressure issues, which is such a small percentage of the population. I think like 25 or something like that. So not really something to restrict. Iodine you can get through cranberry juice and iodized salt. And it's important to do blood work to check these things too. But if you're having thyroid issues, that could be a place to look. So I would say the same. And then just maybe salt, iodine, red meat, probably the first places for a lot of people to look. Do you think there are any supplements that are worth purchasing if nutrition is already taken care of? So probably in that sense, he's probably also referring to micronutrition as well.
In terms of micronutrition?
Well, if you're like already, like, all of the bases already covered, are there supplements that are worth buying, basically, or worth the money?
I would say stick to the basics: protein, creatine.
I agree.
Maybe some beta alanine.
Yep, I agree. I think beta alanine has some efficacy. I've seen some studies on that for sure.
I've seen some studies on it. Yeah,
I think like exactly how you said. I mean, and if all your bases are covered, stick to the basics. Vitamin D is like we just talked about. Fish oil, if you're not eating a fatty fish, but I'd probably recommend fatty fish first. Those are two that are dirt cheap that are just essential, I think. Other things would probably be more related to health. If you're having health issues, like I take like a citrus bergamot because I'm trying to get my HDL up. But like you said, stupid Siri keeps going off. Sorry. A whey isolate, I think, or not even a whey isolate. Honestly, I've come a long way. I think just whey protein in general. If you have a trouble getting in your calories, if that's something that you like having in your diet, that's something to look at. Dextrose, if you are one of those people trying to capitalize on intra-workout nutrition, dextrose, creatine might help. Thermotabs, those thermotabs is like, in my opinion, that's the best pre-workout, or salt is like the best pre-workout. Maybe a cup of coffee. If you're really having trouble with your energy.
Big coffee guy.
Yeah, I like coffee too. And then unfortunately in the vertical diet, they aren't fans of it, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
salt my coffee because one, it cuts the bitterness, and two, I'm not losing as many electrolytes, and then I'll throw thermotabs in my intra-workout. So the coffee, has a lot of antioxidants. I don't think you need a fucking pre-workout with 300 milligrams, a cup of coffee with 100 to 140 milligrams. If you need a little boost, it has been shown to improve 1RM numbers, to improve focus while you lift, endurance, all those things. So definitely something that I utilize a lot. But you don't need a $40, $50 pre-workout. You can just drink a cup of coffee. You can throw down some salt and drink some water, and you'll have a good workout, in my opinion. So probably not a lot that, like the ones that are like test boosters, not worth your money. All that muscle tech shit, probably not worth it. Yeah, some nitric oxide boosters might work, but like I said, if you have some sort of deficiency, usually those tend to work better. So maybe look at the bases first, and then maybe if that works for you.
Yeah.
And then there could be some research coming out on new ones, but I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't seen anything too promising besides the basics, the creatine, and the things that have been tried and true.
Right.
Opinion on partial repetitions as a way to extend a set. I don't know if you've ever used partials in your training at all.
Yeah, I definitely use partials when I do like lateral raises and stuff like that. I mean, again, I like them depending on the training though. There was a study that came out from, I think, the University of Tampa, and what they did was they isolated muscle, and I don't know if I said this in the last podcast, I might have, but they isolated muscle and they pretty much put it in like a carbohydrate type nutrient like gel, I guess, and they compared it to another one, but this one was a control, and they used carbohydrates as nutrients for the muscle cells, and the other one used lactic acid, which is stemmed from the burn you feel from repetition, blood flow, and it showed that the one with lactic acid grew significantly more than the one compared to a diet. So in terms of like partial reps, when you're promoting more blood flow and stuff like that, I tend to like it.
Yeah. I think maybe there might be some. Go ahead.
I would go for it. I like it depending on. I wouldn't do too many. Like on certain sets, I like more of like if I want to just burn out, like end my workout with, I'll do some partials and certain lifts though.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think they might have a place. I think that's I like your example, and it's pretty isolated, so it'd be hard to say exactly. But I think there is some research coming out about metabolites and actual like blood volume in the area at the time of training. So that probably has some merit. And it would probably make sense if you get a large volume of blood, especially maybe towards the end of a workout. I've seen that. I've seen people apply that. I think that the science might just need to catch up to it a little bit more still. So I agree. But for right now, I would say I don't like utilizing them. I use them a lot with John's programs. He would have like cycles. So he'd have like 1 week you do partials, and 1 week you do drop sets. 1 week you do this and that. And
nice.
I found it was fun. It was like, I really enjoyed training like that. You got a good pump. I would say right now where I'm at, I don't like them. And it's very specific to the way I'm training too, though, is I like full repetitions with a full range of motion and standardized form. So it's very hard if you're logging your lifts to standardize a partial repetition, because partial repetition could be a varying range, right? So if I do a bench press, my standard is I go to my chest and then I come all the way up and I come down all the way to my chest. And if I'm doing partials and I'm maybe more fatigued, I might do a smaller partial on one set and a bigger partial on another. And I have no, like if it's coming off my chest, I have no like thing to stop me to tell me that I'm hitting that range of motion. Whereas here, when my arm is fully extended, I know my range is over. When my arm is, when fully shortened, when the muscle is fully shortened, or in this position, sorry, this would be lengthened for chest. When it's down here on my chest, I know that's the rep range. So standardizing form is really important for myself, being able to gauge progress. So I would just say straight sets, And I think a lot of researchers are kind of in the same boat as far as straight sets being the king, but I think there may be places for application of that. So I just don't know them yet. You know what I mean? Like, so I would say, most people could probably focus on that. If you enjoy doing it, then I would say do it. You know what I mean? Like, but I would still like track your consistent, I did 8 reps and then I did 10 partials, and at least try to have that in your logbook and try to keep the partials consistent if you can. But make sure the meat and potatoes, like you tracked your 8 repetitions. The next week you try to get 9, and then partials could be played into that as well. You just want to be able to standardize it and track it somehow so you can be progressive, is what I'm saying, I guess. But yeah, I think it might have some. I think there was a study that Dante Trudell likes to use a lot because he found a DC training and he does weighted stretches, something where they had birds where they strapped weights to their wings, and in the stretch position there was a significant amount of hypertrophy. So that might be something to look at as well. But like I said, I think there's more research that needs to be done there to be able to say what it is. But I mean, putting the muscle under stress, at the end of the day, stressing the muscle, creating greater and greater overload is going to cause the muscle to grow. So it's a basic foundation. So however you do that, that's, but I think range of motion is really important. So I would probably just always go for the full range, I guess. Hope that wasn't too long-winded, but favorite bodybuilder per decade, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. I'm going to start by saying I don't know exactly, especially earlier on, I don't know exactly what eras were. So you can just kind of, you can do the same thing as I'm going to do, is just kind of like general area is what I'm going to do, general era. Go ahead.
Yep. I would say the first, I really liked how Arnold looked, just because, the physique back then is not compared to the physiques now and stuff like that.
I agree.
So I really like the way Arnold looked in terms of aesthetics. I guess what would you say, like maybe the late 70s?
He must have been late 60s, early to mid 70s, I think.
Yeah. I would say him. When it gets to the 80s,
here, let's do this.
Yeah, you're gonna have to.
This is like, I think this is we got like one question after this, so I'm gonna try to get you off soon.
Perfect. You're chilling. Oh yeah, you're chilling big time.
Okay, let's go to desktop share. Let's go to Google. Oh, look, I was actually watching that earlier.
Yeah.
Look at that. Yeah. How ironic. I think I was watching it because of my blood work. I was just kind of checking what range he recommended.
Yep.
Okay. Was I gonna Mr. Olympia? Okay, come on. Sorry, dude. This new Mac, I would, if anybody's in the space for buying a computer, don't buy the new Mac. This fucking touch bar at the top is the most annoying.
You have the touch bar? Yeah, I just got a Mac.
God.
I got a touch bar.
You got it with one?
I got it without.
Oh, dude, good fucking decision.
Simple, it's easy. It gets me.
Good fucking decision, because I keep touching Siri. I keep touching all the stuff at the top, and I never use. And Siri just turned on. God fucking damn it. And Siri turned on my phone too. Fuck you, Siri. God.
Oh, Sergio Oliva.
Oh, and it turned on again. Okay, I'm never gonna. It's taking over my life. Okay, here's 70. So obviously Arnold. Let's see, 75. Yeah. So I agree, Arnold there.
Probably still.
Yeah, I think Arnold came back. I think this is when Arnold came back. Huh?
Oh, Arnold came. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like Franco's in some of these. Okay, let's do like 85. Let's just go mid-era.
85, I want to say, was probably right before Lee Haney.
There's Lee Haney right there. So I think Lee Haney won probably there. I see. Right? Is that Gaspari? I think Rich Gaspari. Let's see comparisons. Tom Platz. I would say in this era it's probably Tom Platz. I really like his mentality. I think he was a little overdone. Who's this guy? He's got a phenomenal physique. I like his structure.
That guy looks good.
Yeah, I would probably say, it's going to be both Haney and Platz from this era. Like, I really like them as people and as bodybuilders and physique wise. Yep. Obviously, Platz's legs were kind of a little overdeveloped for him.
Right, he's a big leg guy.
Yeah, Haney has an amazing waist. Look at that. Insane. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Insane.
Even by today's standards, I like that a lot. Okay, let's go to 90s. We're starting to look at
now. We're
Flex
starting
Wheeler.
Oh yeah,
I'm by far.
Sean Ray.
Flex showed up 93, I think.
93. Yeah, he looked great. 93. I think that's when he was.
Dorian from the beginning of this area, obviously. But I would say, I mean, my favorite physique of all time is Flex Wheeler.
For sure.
And obviously that's, why I got into bodybuilding, because I thought it was just so artistic, and I kind of come from that background. So
I think he separates himself the most for sure when it comes to body. There's a lot of
I don't think we've seen anybody like him. Really.
Unreal.
And I had this debate with my buddy the other day. It was like, he was asking me, what would you rather see people come in so shredded, or would you rather see people come in like a little bit, not like a little bit like more full but not as shredded? And I think I've always just preferred that, and I think it's because Flex, he was just so round, and he never sacrificed that fullness to be shredded, like to the bone, you know what I mean? And I think it really played well because of that fullness and that bubbliness. And I think, even Phil Heath, I don't think he's always the leanest, but I think he looks phenomenal because of
definitely not. But Phil Heath looks great. It's always, in my opinion, the first thing that catches the eye, the aesthetics of the muscle belly.
Yeah, and I think if you get too lean, you start to look stringy, and you lose some of that aesthetic appeal.
100%. 100%.
But yeah, Dorian, Yeah, but Dorian is phenomenal, obviously. But I would say probably the 90s, Flex kind of takes the cake for me there. 2000s Cutler.
Yeah, Jay Cutler guy.
Yeah,
I like Jay Cutler.
I love Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler all around, man, businessman.
Great business. Yeah.
Ronnie looked insane at this Olympia, like just fucking ridiculous. Like this right here, this fucking shit. There, let me move you. This is ridiculous. This is, I think, Ronnie at 03.
Yep.
Oh my God, what the?
Yeah, Ronnie was a different breed. There's some about his abs that don't really just. I can't really.
His abs.
Yeah, I don't really.
Yeah. He kind of got like a turtle shell towards the end there.
But he, God, let me tell you, he was just another creature.
Yeah, I would say, but from the early thousands, Cutler, and this photo, especially Cutler is my favorite.
That's when he re-won it, I want to say, right?
I think so. This was like when it was really advertised, the Cutler versus Coleman, and it was like battle.
Yeah.
Moving forward, let's say the 10s. That's a really difficult one. I mean, Phil Heath, I like his physique, but
I like Phil Heath's physique for sure, but he's different. I don't know.
He's different. I don't like his personality at all, for sure. Like, I think he's a cocky, arrogant guy. He has me blocked on Instagram, so that tells you something. I can't go to Phil Heath's page. I don't know why.
Don't get me wrong. Look again. That picture you kind of went over. He looks great in, but there's nothing about him, like in terms of mentality, personality.
Yeah, really personality. Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's a reason why we look at bodybuilders as part of that.
I mean, to be honest, Dorian Yates. I love Dorian Yates for his mentality. But to be honest, I mean, he looked good, but Flex Wheeler looks better than any of those guys. You know what I'm saying? In my opinion.
I agree.
But, even Flex Wheeler's mentality. I mean, dude, I remember when he used to coach me over at Squatto and stuff, and he has a very winning mentality. You know what I'm saying? Very real approach to it.
I commend him. I want to try to get him on. I don't know if he will at some point, but I commend him for like all of this. I mean, to be able to come out of all the stuff, all the struggles that he has, and still be like that. I think people write that off and they say certain things about him without knowing him, because we both have personally met him. We personally met his family, and without knowing him. But when you realize like all the shit that he's been through, like holy fucking shit, like to be able to just be himself, like to be a positive person, all that stuff. Some people come out of the other side of that and they're like just so everything's shit, like their life isn't put together. So I mean, I commend him for all that he's been able to push through and whatnot. So mentality wise, I look up to him in a major way because he's been able to overcome all this shit, and I'm over here like, especially when he was coaching me, I'm like, I'm over here fucking worrying about how many carbohydrates I'm eating, and he's fucking like had his fucking leg amputated. Holy shit. Like, and he's able to fucking walk. Like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, my problems are shit compared to that. You know what I mean? And he's still on Instagram. I know. You know what I mean? Like I went on live with him. It wasn't
I saw
super
that.
far.
That was so exciting to see.
That was really cool. Yeah.
But
just to still have a positive outlook. Even the ones before me that went on live with him, he was just so positive to them and helping them. Yeah. And I agree. Mentality wise, I think that's a good reason to look at bodybuilders, but physique wise too, one of the best physiques ever. I have yet to see too many people of this era that have like really impressed me. Nathan Diash's structure, I love. Like, I don't know if you've seen Nathan Diasha.
Mhm. Mhm.
He's a newer bodybuilder from the UK,
Yeah.
but again, the attitude is kind of just shit. So I'm just
Oh,
like,
is it? See, that ruins it
yeah.
for me because I
No, it does. It does.
really like how Phil Heath looks, but fuck, dude, I
Yeah.
can't get around with him.
I think in the tens, I've still yet to have someone who really blow me away, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I was coming up and watching Cutler, I was like, holy shit. But I still really have someone yet to blow me away, have everything, have the personality, everything that comes along with it that really goes along with it. Okay. One last question, and I'll let you go. Opinion on Ian Vier. So this is, I talked about him earlier, Chris Bumstead's coach, saying that he doesn't use but more than 500 milligrams of test in the off season.
So he's saying he doesn't use more than 500?
Yeah. And this is, classic physique, Mr. Olympia, right?
Is it? Okay. I mean, let's see. In terms of what does he cruise on 500? That's it. He doesn't run.
No, and this is his blast. His blast is 500 in the off season.
Oh, his blast is 500.
Yeah, I watched the video. It was on RX Muscle. I would like to add that they didn't say what other compounds. Like they just said he only takes 500 milligrams of testosterone,
which could mean virtually damn near. That's
his base, right? I would assume that they meant that he doesn't, because guys do push their tests like to 1 gram to 1.5 grams. I think, yeah, completely unnecessary in my opinion. I think even at the highest level. So I think even just saying that, as long as he's not taking 2 grams of other shit, it's probably a positive thing.
Yeah.
But I would assume he probably takes stuff on top of that. Like he probably takes 400 milligrams of TEQ. I think that's still possible. I think it's possible for him to be where he's at with under a gram of gear, 100%. I mean, I've seen that with myself. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and 500 mgs, people don't understand. If you took like maybe an oral with that, you could get a shit ton of gains. If you are I mean, Chris is on top of his training and his diet. He's a world-class athlete. He's a Mr. Classic physique, Mr. Olympia, right?
Yep.
He doesn't fucking miss a beat when it comes to that shit. You add in 500 mgs of test and maybe an anadrol, you are going to blow up. And he doesn't have to grow anymore. Think about that too.
Yeah.
So I 100% believe it. I believe that he got there with maybe only 500 or maybe adding in a compound here and there. I 100% believe that.
Important thing to look at too is the balance of it. If he's taking 500, that means he's optimized his training to be perfectly in terms of recovery, nutrition to 100%. Aid recovery.
I agree. So, I think once you have all of those things, you're hitting on all cylinders. You have all those things available, and then you add in the drugs.
Oh yeah,
you will become a fucking monster. You don't need a lot, 100%. Because I think doing the frequent injections, getting enough rest and recovery, the way your body actually utilizes those hormones once they are, maybe even added exogenously. I mean, it works when they aren't, when they're just natural hormones, but when they're added exogenously, you still are able to utilize more of that. Like I was talking to my buddy, I'm still starting to understand more about, drug metabolism, things like that, pharmacology. But he was talking, I was like, well, why does what's it called? What's the fucking process? It's basically the process of DHT conversion and all these negative side effects. And it's basically
DHT, right?
Yeah. But it's like, fuck, I can't remember what the process is called. I'd have to look it up later, but anyway, the reason,
right?
Yeah, some of it. The reason why some of it happens is because you have excess, right?
Right.
Why does excess amount of aromatization happen? It's when you're not fully utilized, your body isn't utilizing the hormone, and it takes other pathways, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the basic understanding of what I have of it right now. And it's like, if you're constantly bombarding yourself with too much exogenous hormone and your body doesn't have enough receptors for it, it'll make more receptors, but it'll also go to other places, right? It'll go to your scalp. It'll go to, wherever else in your body where you don't want it, right? You want it in the muscle. You want it to work in the muscle. You want it to work, the hormones to work in that way.
And it's funny because the process is pretty simple. If you, again, like for everybody watching too, if you compare the testosterone and estrogen compounds itself, all it has to do is cleave one bond. Once it cleaves that bond, you got yourself estrogen. Yeah. So the body could convert.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. It's like, we can just do this instead. I don't have the space for this. So.
Right. And all hormones are the structure, they're sterols, they're all similar 5-ring structures. So it doesn't take a lot to convert into a different type of, think about what steroid, like Dianabol is they're all derivatives. They're all just altercations in certain in certain bonds that just, it doesn't alter the structure of the sterol, but it alters the way it might react in the liver or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that makes me frustrated is that people don't believe it when he says that. And and like I said, there might be some caveat to that, but people just assume, and I think there's not enough people actually saying their dosages. But even then, when Lee Priest goes out and says his dosage, or Dorian Yates,
Priest is so open. Yeah.
People are like, well, he's fucking lying. I'm like, no, he's not. Like, do you really think people have to take 3 grams of gear to get like that? I don't believe so. And you know, I mean, like, look, I'm not a fucking pro bodybuilder yet, but I achieved a 285 pound physique, you know, not lean, but I was there. I was that heavy, and I had a decent amount of muscle mass without even getting close to the doses some of these guys are preaching. Right. So I can only assume that it's to get any bigger. I really think it's just that I just have to push food harder and be able to utilize more food, and that's really I've actually lowered my dosages over the years as I've grown. Like, people don't understand. I haven't gone up. I've just gotten better at nutrition and training to where those drugs are being utilized more. So I'll say it right here. I mean, I haven't touched. I have in the past got up to 1.5 grams. Right. I use 1.2 in the off season, maybe with an oral on top of that.
Right.
If that. And I don't see any need to go up from that at any point in time soon. And I hope more people can be open about that, and I hope more people can believe that. But always, you're going to have people who say, no, you're lying. You're going to have people who take much more, don't work on their training and nutrition, who are going to dispute that and saying, well, no, I have to take 2 grams. Like, no, you don't. And then you're going to have people who are just lazy inherently, and then they're going to believe that. So
really, I think it all starts in the education.
Yeah,
if you know what you're doing, you know, then it makes it easier. But a lot of people, they really, it's you know, this is what people say, so I'm going to jump on it. And then
well, that circles back to the first question that Jordan asks, is that, you know, why is everybody afraid of estrogen? You don't have an understanding of these basic things. You shouldn't even be touching drugs if you don't. And you know, unfortunately, I think we all know a lot of people who do that and just take drugs, and they're like, I mean, I'm sure in the college environment, you get people coming up, I just jumped on a cycle, and you're like, why? Like,
there's been many times where somebody's like, I started taking tests. I'm like, all right, well, what's the cycle look like? PCT, what is your diet?
Like, oh, I just stick the needle in the bottle and then stick it in my body. I don't even know how much I'm taking. You're like,
I knew one kid, great guy, but he was taking his test, and what happened was his pull needle that he used to get the oil out. I guess he I don't know if he didn't disinfect it or he reused it, but it contaminated, and he contaminated the whole vial. Yeah. So he was injecting his test, like, damn, dude, I got this fucking lump on my ass, and you know, it looks infected. And he went to the doctor. He's like, yeah, dude, it was just my draw needle. My draw needle was, you know, and then he started taking the test again. I'm like, dude, you contaminated the whole vial, buddy.
Yeah. No, I did that once. I contaminated a vial. I got an infection in my shoulder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but that's, you know, over however many years. I think there's people. I heard a story of a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard monster stories of like people getting huge infections and not taking care of them and stuff. I mean, just the basic, like having to sterilize your equipment. Like, you shouldn't, if you can't do that properly, you should be, you know, looking at doing something else. Like, come on, dude. Like, Anyway, I'm going to let you go here. It's been another 2 hours.
But beauty, we covered a lot, you know.
No, I agree. I think I'm going to, like, I went back and like took notes on our last podcast because I learned so much. And then I was able to go and research the shit. Like you saw, I posted up me studying biology after, and I understood more of what you said today. So
and you're getting in the nitty gritty where you're talking about the Tata box and the promoters and all that.
Well, I got to start. I'm doing like the YouTube crash courses. You know, I'm starting at the basics because I want to
used to study, man.
Yeah, well, I'm reading the first chapter of that book I showed you, and it's like there's so much terminology that I'm like, what the fuck is this? I haven't even gotten to like the stuff I already know about, like the hypertrophy. I already know a good solid base foundation of that, but like the, you know, myofibrils, sarcoplasm, how we create more when you
myotubules. Yeah. Insane.
And I'm like still trying to conceptualize some of it, and it's talking about how those things adapt first. Like you'll have more sarcoplasm, or you know, you'll those things will in response to training will increase to support it and adapt. And I'm like, holy shit. Like it took me so much like digging to find out, okay, what is sarcoplasmic reticulum? How does the DNA, RNA transcription occur?
How does it translate? Right.
God.
Which is funny because I swear to God, I would be in class and they're talking about some, can you know, let's describe on how the myoblasts eventually become myotubes. I'd be like, oh shit, like searching up on my laptop again.
Yeah, no, I was doing that and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go like do a full, like, it's not a college course, but it's, you know, at least some, because I'm like, shit, otherwise I'm going to be lost reading this book. So
yeah, I'd come home and go on YouTube and be like, all right, I need to see some conceptual of it so I could actually.
No, I agree. That's why school was so difficult for me. Is I'm an audiovisual learner. Like that's why those videos are so useful, and that's why a lot of my understanding comes from researchers talking about their research.
Right.
I have a hard time sitting down and reading, but if a researcher explains it, especially in a digestible way, I got it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Watched the video a couple of times and it's in my head, you know? So someone to look up, you should check him out because I found him. And this is where I actually got invested in science like a year ago. And why I'm even sitting here with you today is Mike Israetel.
Okay.
He's, I don't know what his degree is in, but he is really, really well educated and he breaks things down in such a digestible manner. He's funny. Like, we need more people like that explaining the science, you know what I mean? And I'd love to get him on here one day, but
it's weird because a lot of people are very they're very like kind of obsessed with, all right, well, I need to sound smart, I need to, you know what I'm saying? And they would use these words every time I had presentations. I'm talking to them like they're in first grade, you know,
that's something I need to do better because I definitely like tend to use terminology because that's, you know, what I know. And I think that's something that's going to be a part of the process that I move forward is I'm going to have to like kind of pull back a little bit and like use more examples and things like that because that's how, you know, if you can break it down to something where someone can even visualize it in their head, they'll retain it so much better, you know? So more examples. You did a good job of that at the last podcast where you're like, you know, it's like this, you know, and you use some analogies.
That's what I try to do because I was like that. So I'm like, well, if I'm like that, I'm sure there's many people like, you know, we'd have these people going up there talking about all this stuff. And I'm just like typing. I'm like, what the hell? And it's all individual based. And then it's like, all right.
And you have to go back in your notes and you have to Google 20 terms to be able to read a fucking sentence.
To put the sentence together. And then you're like,
I got it. You're like, all right, just 30 more sentences now.
That's all it says, you know?
Yeah, it's just the fucking, you know, molecular, like if you were to take a banana and like read all the chemicals off in it, you'd be like, what the fuck is this? And then just like, oh, it's just a banana.
Yeah. Banana. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just
right.
So it's so that's another thing is the way people like kind of teach information. It's very, sometimes it's just like, hey, break it down, you know, make it easy, put it in layman's terms so that when we do get a little more complicated, like certain professors get more complicated, some professors expect you know it out the gate, like, all this stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is like the problem is some of them can't accept the fact that other people, they can't remember when they were there.
Right.
And they can't be like humble enough, I guess.
That's how I failed chemistry the first year, actually.
Yeah.
You know?
So you should fucking know this. Like, no, I'm in a class, so you teach me this. Like,
well, this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to learn it, you know? Yeah.
No, I agree.
I totally agree with you, you know? So it's fun. But...
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I've reached out to a couple of people, so I'll keep in contact with you. I may be doing some solo, but I want to get you on with like some of the science people just so, you know, we can kind of talk on similar terms. It'd be really cool. So I'll keep in touch with you, bro. I may actually be going to the Reno area in a couple months. I'll let you know if it works out because I am moving. So
are you what's
I'm not moving there. I'm moving to Arizona.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, dude, let me give you, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I've considered it. You know,
really?
if we can get,
I fucking like you here, you know.
If we get Maddie to transfer credits over there, maybe we talk about it. Maybe I'll come visit and scope out the area.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a place right now. So.
Oh, are you? Yeah. You can't really. I don't know if you could even see it, but if you look through that window,
I just see myself.
That behind there, it's the university right there. I'm literally right across the street.
That's awesome. Yeah, because Maddie needs to go to school. I can care less. I just want to be able to work out. You know, I want to be able to work from home and work out and maybe have, you know, a bartending job or something to make some extra money.
For the podcast station.
Maybe I'll stop by because we were talking about going to Tahoe. So maybe.
Hey, trust me, the weather's perfect for it too. So.
Yeah. We need to do something right now. Yeah. All right, cool, man. Well, I'll keep in touch. text me and we'll talk. All right, bro.
Let's do it.
Thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, definitely. It's been
100%.
really cool conversations for sure.
Great conversations.
Yeah,
I'm probably gonna go back and the little things, boom,
Yeah.
right into it. That's the best way to learn.
Well, and you can piggyback off of it, and like, if something you're interested in, you can go research it. That's exactly what I did. So, and like even the things where I'm like, I don't know what study, I'll probably go back and like look it up. So we can talk a little bit about it next time. So.
Oh yeah, 100%.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night. Okay, go get some food in.
Oh, dude, you know it. Have a good one, Dylan. Thanks again, man.
Peace.